What happens when one of Hollywood's most beloved actors sits down for what should be a routine promotional interview, only to find himself facing the most aggressive questioning of his career? What unfolds is a television moment so explosive that it ends with security being called and a guest being forcibly removed from the studio. This is the story of Johnny Depp's catastrophic appearance on The View and how Joy Behar turned what should have been a friendly chat into a career-defining confrontation that had viewers picking sides and social media erupting in chaos. Before we dive into this incredible story, make sure to hit that subscribe button and let me know in the comments which side you think was right in this whole mess. Now, let's get into what really happened behind the scenes. Johnny Depp walked onto the View set that morning, expecting the usual promotional routine. He had a new film to discuss, some light banter about his latest projects, maybe a few laughs with the panel. The studio audience greeted him with enthusiastic applause as he settled into the guest chair, flashing that trademark smile that had charmed audiences for decades. "Welcome back to The View, Johnny," Whoopi Goldberg began warmly. "It's always great to have you here." "Thanks for having me, Whoopi. Always a pleasure," Depp replied, adjusting his signature rings and looking relaxed. But Joy Behar had other plans. From the moment the camera started rolling, there was something different in her demeanor. She sat forward in her chair, papers shuffled in front of her, wearing an expression that suggested this wasn't going to be the friendly chat everyone expected. "So, Johnny," Joy interrupted before anyone else could speak, "let's talk about your recent legal troubles and how they've affected your ability to get work in Hollywood." The studio fell silent. This wasn't the gentle warm-up question guests typically received. Depp's smile faltered slightly, but he maintained his composure. "Well, Joy, I'm actually here to talk about my new film," he said diplomatically. "It's a really exciting project that I think people are gonna love. But surely you can understand why people might be hesitant to support your work given everything that's come out." Joy pressed, completely ignoring his redirect. "Don't you think you owe the public some kind of explanation?" The other hosts exchanged uncomfortable glances. Sunny Hostin shifted in her seat, clearly sensing the tension building. Sarah Haynes looked down at her notes, while Whoopi tried to intervene. "Joy, maybe we should," Whoopi started. "No, I think this is exactly what we should be discussing," Joy cut her off sharply. "This is The View, and we don't shy away from tough questions. Johnny, you've made millions of dollars from fans, particularly women fans, and now many of them feel betrayed. What do you say to them?" Depp's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. Years of media training had taught him to stay calm under pressure, but there was something particularly aggressive about Joy's approach that was clearly getting under his skin. "I say that people should focus on the art, not the artist's personal life," he replied carefully. "I've always tried to bring characters to life that entertain people, and that's what I'm here to talk about." "But you can't separate the two, can you?" Joy shot back immediately. "When you're asking people to pay money to see you in theaters, you're asking them to support you personally. And given your track record with relationships, don't you think that's a problem?" The audience began to murmur. Some people could be heard whispering, and the energy in the room shifted dramatically. What had started as a typical daytime talk show segment was rapidly becoming something much more confrontational. "My track record?" Depp repeated, his voice taking on a slight edge. "Joy, I came here to discuss my work, not to be put on trial for my personal life." "Well, maybe that's the problem," Joy replied, leaning back in her chair with a smug expression. "Maybe you think you can just show up places and charm your way out of taking responsibility for your actions." Sunny Hostin finally jumped in, trying to defuse the situation. "Johnny, tell us about working with your co-stars on this new project. What was that experience like?" But Joy wasn't about to let anyone else take control of the interview. "We'll get to that," she said dismissively. "But first, I want Johnny to explain to our audience why they should trust him again." "Trust me?" Depp's composure was beginning to crack. "Joy, I'm an actor. I make movies. People can choose to watch them or not. I'm not running for president here." "But you're asking for people's money and their emotional investment," Joy countered. "And frankly, I think a lot of our viewers are wondering if you deserve it." The tension in the studio was now palpable. Camera operators were getting tighter shots, sensing that something significant was happening. The other hosts looked increasingly uncomfortable, but Joy seemed to be feeding off the confrontation. "You know what, Joy?" Depp said, his voice steady but with an unmistakable firmness. "I think you've made up your mind about me before I even walked in here. This isn't an interview, it's an ambush." It's accountability, Joy shot back. Something you seem to have trouble with. That was the moment everything changed. Depp's famous temper, usually kept carefully in check during public appearances, finally began to show through the cracks in his diplomatic facade. Accountability? Depp repeated, his voice dropping to a dangerously quiet level. From someone who makes a living tearing people down on television? That's rich, Joy. The studio audience gasped audibly. This was not the charming, soft-spoken Johnny Depp they were used to seeing in interviews. Joy's eyes lit up, clearly thrilled that she had finally gotten a reaction. "Oh, so now you're going to attack me personally?" Joy said, with mock innocence. "Ladies and gentlemen, this is exactly what I'm talking about. The minute someone asks Johnny Depp a tough question, he gets defensive and starts lashing out." "I'm not lashing out," Depp said, his hands gripping the arms of his chair. "I'm pointing out the hypocrisy of someone who profits from controversy lecturing me about accountability." Whoopi tried desperately to regain control. "Okay, let's all take a breath here and—" "No, Whoopi," Joy interrupted again, waving her hand dismissively. "I want to hear what Johnny has to say. Go ahead, Johnny. Tell us how you really feel about critics." "You want to know how I feel?" Depp leaned forward, his famous laid-back demeanor completely gone now. "I feel like I walked into a courtroom instead of a talk show. I feel like you decided to prosecute me the moment I sat down, and you're not interested in anything I actually have to say." "Maybe because what you have to say isn't worth hearing," Joy replied with a cruel smile. "Maybe people are tired of your sob stories and your victim complex." The other host looked absolutely mortified. Sarah Haynes was staring at her hands, while Sunny Hostin kept glancing toward the producers off camera, as if silently pleading for someone to intervene. But the cameras kept rolling, and Joy kept pushing. "Victim complex?" Depp's voice was rising now. "You sit here every day judging people you've never met, making assumptions about situations you know nothing about, and you want to talk to me about victim complexes?" "I know what I've read," Joy shot back. "I know what the courts have said. I know what multiple people have testified to under oath. Do you?" Depp stood up abruptly, causing his chair to roll backward. "Or do you know what gets ratings? Because that seems to be all you care about." The studio fell completely silent, except for the hum of the cameras. Joy remained seated, but her posture had changed. For the first time since the interview began, she looked slightly uncertain about how far she had pushed things. "Sit down, Johnny," she said, trying to regain her authoritative tone. "You're being ridiculous." "I'm being ridiculous?" Depp laughed bitterly. "I came here to talk about a film that employed hundreds of people, that might bring some joy to audiences, and instead you want to relitigate my entire personal life on national television. And I'm the one being ridiculous?" "You're a public figure," Joy insisted. "Your personal life is public business when it affects—" "When it affects what?" Depp interrupted. "When it affects your ability to feel morally superior? When it affects your ratings? Because that's what this is really about, isn't it, Joy?" Joy's face was turning red, but whether from anger or embarrassment was unclear. "How dare you question my motives? I'm trying to give our viewers the truth about who you really are." "The truth?" Depp's voice was now filled with incredulous anger. "You wouldn't know the truth if it walked up and introduced itself. You deal in gossip and speculation and call it journalism." "I deal in facts," Joy snapped back, "something you seem allergic to." "Facts?" Depp moved closer to the panel table. "Here's a fact for you, Joy. You've spent the last 10 minutes trying to destroy me on television, not because you care about justice or truth, but because you enjoy it. You get off on tearing people down." The tension in the room was now so thick that even the camera operators seemed nervous. Producers were frantically gesturing from the sidelines, but Joy seemed determined to see this confrontation through to its bitter end. "I get off on holding people accountable," Joy retorted, "something that clearly makes you very uncomfortable." "What makes me uncomfortable," Depp said, his voice shaking with barely controlled fury, "is watching someone abuse their platform to bully people for entertainment. You're not a journalist, Joy. You're a professional provocateur. And you're a has-been actor who can't handle criticism," Joy fired back immediately. That was the breaking point. Depp's hands clenched into fists, and for a moment, everyone in the studio held their breath, wondering if this was about to become physical. "You know what?" Depp said finally, his voice deadly quiet. "You're right about one thing, Joy. I can't handle this kind of criticism. I can't handle sitting here and being lectured by someone who wouldn't last 5 minutes dealing with the kind of scrutiny you're so eager to dish out." Then maybe you shouldn't be in the public eye, Joy replied coldly. And maybe you shouldn't be on television, Depp shot back. But here we are. Whoopi finally found her voice again. Okay, we really need to. No, Joy cut her off one final time. I want to know what Johnny thinks gives him the right to come on our show and insult me and our audience. Your audience? Depp looked around the studio at the shocked faces staring back at him. I think your audience deserves better than watching you tear people apart for sport. I think they deserve actual conversation instead of whatever this is. Joy stood up now too, facing Depp across the panel table. This is reality, Johnny. This is what happens when people ask you real questions instead of lobbing you softballs about your latest vanity project. Real questions? Depp's composure completely shattered. You haven't asked me a single real question since I sat down. You've just been attacking me personally and calling it journalism. The confrontation had reached a fever pitch, with both participants standing and facing off, while the other hosts sat frozen, unsure whether to intervene or simply watch the disaster unfold. You want journalism? Joy's voice was now dripping with venom. Here's some journalism for you, Johnny. Your career is over. Nobody wants to work with you. Nobody wants to watch your movies. And sitting here throwing a tantrum isn't going to change that. The words hung in the air like poison. Even Joy seemed to realize she had crossed a line that couldn't be uncrossed. The studio audience was completely silent, some people covering their mouths in shock at what they were witnessing. Depp stared at her for a long moment, his chest rising and falling as he tried to control his breathing. When he finally spoke, his voice was dangerously calm. You know what, Joy? You're absolutely right. My career might be over. Maybe nobody does want to work with me anymore. But at least I had a career to lose. At least I created something. All you do is sit here every day and tear down people who actually tried to build something. I built this show, Joy snapped back. I built my reputation by telling the truth. You built your reputation by being cruel. Depp replied immediately, by hiding behind a panel and attacking people who can't fight back on equal terms. That's not truth-telling, Joy. That's cowardice. Joy's face went white. How dare you call me a coward? I ask the questions nobody else will ask. No, Depp said, taking a step closer to the panel. You ask the questions designed to humiliate people? There's a difference between holding someone accountable and publicly destroying them for entertainment. If you feel destroyed, maybe that says something about your conscience, Joy shot back, but there was less conviction in her voice now. My conscience is fine, Depp said quietly, but yours should be bothering you. Because what you're doing right now, in front of all these people, says everything about who you really are. The other hosts had given up any pretense of trying to intervene. They sat in stunned silence as the two combatants faced off, both breathing heavily, both clearly past the point of no return. Who I really am? Joy's voice cracked slightly. I'm someone who isn't afraid to ask tough questions. I'm someone who holds powerful people accountable. You're someone who bullies people on television? Depp replied flatly. You're someone who profits from cruelty and calls it courage. And the saddest part is, I don't think you even realize what you've become. That hit home. Joy's expression flickered for just a moment, a flash of uncertainty crossing her face before the mask of righteous anger snapped back into place. Get off my stage, she said through gritted teeth. Gladly, Depp replied, turning toward the exit. But Joy wasn't done. And don't come back. We don't need washed-up actors coming on here and lecturing us about morality. Depp stopped walking. Slowly, he turned back around, and the look in his eyes made several audience members actually gasp. Washed up? He said, his voice barely above a whisper. You want to know what washed up looks like, Joy? It's spending your golden years attacking people half your age because you never had the talent to create anything yourself. It's turning into exactly the kind of bitter, vindictive person that audiences tune in to watch because they feel sorry for you. Security! Joy shouted suddenly, her composure finally cracking completely. Get him out of here! But Depp held up his hand as two security guards approached from the wings. Don't worry, he said, his voice steady again. I'm leaving. But before I do, I want everyone in this audience to remember something. This is what happens when you give cruel people power. This is what happens when you reward bullying with applause and ratings. He looked directly into the main camera, and this is what happens when someone finally stands up to it. Joy was shaking with rage. You're pathetic, she spat. A pathetic has-been who can't handle being called out. Depp smiled then, but it wasn't a pleasant expression. You know what's really pathetic, Joy? Spending your life tearing down people's dreams and calling it a career. Spending your time destroying instead of creating? That's pathetic. The security guards were now flanking Depp, but he walked calmly toward the exit without resistance. Just before he reached the edge of the stage, he turned back one final time. By the way, he said conversationally, my new film opens next weekend for anyone who's interested in supporting actual art instead of whatever this is. And with that, Johnny Depp walked off the view stage, leaving behind a stunned studio audience, a panel of speechless hosts, and one very rattled Joy Behar, who was still standing behind the panel table, trembling with a mixture of rage and what might have been shame. The cameras kept rolling for another 30 seconds, capturing Joy's attempts to regain her composure while the other hosts sat in complete silence. Finally, Whoopi called for a commercial break, and the most explosive television moment of the year came to an abrupt end. The confrontation lasted less than 15 minutes, but it revealed something about both participants that audiences had never seen before. Johnny Depp, stripped of his usual charm and diplomacy, fighting back against what he saw as systematic bullying. And Joy Behar, her aggressive interviewing style taken to its logical extreme, exposed as someone more interested in destruction than discovery. What did you think of this incredible confrontation? Was Johnny Depp right to fight back against Joy's aggressive questioning? Or did he cross the line with his personal attacks? Let me know in the comments below what side you're on, and don't forget to subscribe for more behind-the-scenes stories from Hollywood's most dramatic moments.